I'm Amy Knight. I am the current president of AACVPR. Welcome to Day on the Hill prep call. For those of you who are veterans today on the Hill, this will sound similar to prior years, I'm sure. For those of you who are new, welcome. This kind of prep call goes a long way in just easing some of those butterflies about getting in touch with your representatives. You're in for a treat. There's a wealth of information to be had here. We have our own Karen Louie. She's going to tell us more about how the Day on the Hill process works, give us some of the talking points around the Improving Access to Quality CR Care Act and the Sustaining Outpatient Services Act. But really, most importantly, just to give you that sense of you can do this. These are your people that you are representing, our patients and our constituents for cardiac rehab and pulmonary rehab for the legislation upcoming in 2022. So with no further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Karen Louie.
Amy, that's wonderful. I'm so calm now and relaxed. I can just flow right into this. Welcome. Thank you all for taking time today. I'm going to talk quickly because there are many on the agenda who know a lot more than I do and are more articulate than I am. But I'll just give you the background because I've been here long enough to kind of know it. We're in our 5th year with the Sustaining Outpatient Services Act. It's now number 3348. And yet the urgency has only increased. And we all know why. We've been through a couple years of difficult times, program closure, some permanent, some temporary, some we're not sure, down in staff, staff lost, some will be back, some won't. We've got a new diagnosis for pulmonary rehab, and we didn't even have room for them when we had just COPD for pulmonary rehab. So there's a larger demand and need, a real need for the pulmonary rehab services. We have been, I would say, on the trend toward successful in effectively messaging to patients and doctors and payers, to the different offices of CMS, that these are valuable services in that they are class 1 recommendation. They reduce all-cause mortality and reduce hospitalization. Those are two of the more most meaningful outcomes that a service could provide. So referrals, consequently, are improving with all the work from all those entities plus Million Hearts. And yet we don't have an ability, or it's very limited, to expand to meet the need. That's why this bill is at this point even more urgent than it ever was before. You've seen the cardiac rehab deserts map that we have that's posted on the Hill, and you look at that and it's just, it's abysmal. And every meeting I've been in, when that's used, the health staffer's mouth just drops. It's just so visual and impactful. So we know the urgency is needed. And I think if I had to do it in one sentence, I'd steal words from Bob in Delaware, who said, "This act restores the congressional intent of Section 603 of the Balanced Budget Act of 2015. After that was passed, letters came from Congress, both the Senate side and the House side. Many signed on in 2018 expressing concerns that Section 603 might have negative ramifications on rural services, on valuable services, all of which has absolutely come to fruition in our example of cardiac and pulmonary rehab services. So if any of you have been on a call with me, you kind of know what I'm going to say. This is a bipartisan bill. There is no cost to this bill, and we had a no cost. We had a CBO, a Congressional Budget Office score done before we even went any farther with this bill 5 years ago, to be sure that that wouldn't be the barrier, and cost is not the barrier, very low. That external score is on that DOTH webpage as well. And there's no opposition. All of our professional societies are together on this, in agreement in the need. So that's a strong statement, and they need to know that. They want to know that. They're listening for that. We have full support from the chairs of the Ways and Means Committee, Chairman Neal, and the Energy and Commerce Committee, Chairman Pallone. Now, why is that important? Those are the two committees in the House that are responsible for Medicare legislation, along with in the Senate side, and the Finance Committee. So that's why we've kind of made the first priority to reach out to those Energy and Commerce, Ways and Means members, particularly the health subcommittees, but everybody on those two committees. And that's why that state by state grid is posted on that Day on the Hill page as well. Second priority are all districts, of course, especially yours. So if you're in a district, but it's not one of those two committees, that's okay. You are the constituent, you are the VIP, and those calls are important too. But we're in a bit of a, we feel some time pressure. There is a possible vehicle. There's a Medicare fixed package going later this spring. It did not go last spring for obvious reasons. And that's a vehicle that bundles a number of smaller Medicare fixed bills like ours. Ours was never intended to be a standalone bill. There were others languishing in that same way. So that's what the terminology is. And if the chairs of these committees see support, that means signature from their committee members, then they have assured us that they will work hard to make sure this is included in that larger healthcare package. Now, it can be included without a Senate companion bill. We had a Senate companion bill, but we lost the Democrat who was co-introducing. And Senator Hoeven is very eager to find another Democrat to co-introduce with him. And I'm going to say that but it's not me, some here have been working very hard to find that Senate Democrat. That is Delaware, Tom Dunlop, Pat Kamas, and that Delaware group did an amazing job trying. Wayne Reynolds, Kate Trainer, Paulette, Ginny, the whole Massachusetts gang worked really hard with in Massachusetts for a Senate bill. Marlis continues to work in North Dakota with Senator Hoeven to help. Holly and Janelle are working in Arizona to help. Lauren Stable in Rhode Island helped to try and get that. So when I say we, I mean there's a lot of folks who are also working on that. However, in the meantime, we really want to focus on HR 3348. Second bill is HR 1956. Some of you might have been born that year. This will allow non-physician practitioners to order and supervise cardiac and pulmonary rehab. The bill that we all worked hard, like for 5 years in 2018 to pass, was going to allow NPPs to supervise, but this is even bigger and better. So the two bills are very synergistic. And in my mind, we can't take more referrals without more space. We all have longer waiting lists. We have perhaps opportunity for the bigger space across the street, down the street, in that clinic, out in the rural area where they now no longer have a hospital because that's closed. So both bills together really improve access for our patients to receive these two beneficial services. And that's my elevator speech. Now I'm going to let some of the pros speak, and I'd like Pat Kamas to go ahead and start. Thanks, Pat.
Thanks, Karen, and hi, everyone. It's nice to see everyone, even at this distance. Karen asked me to relay to you our experience last year in talking to actually two senators on the Senate Finance Committee, neither of which have committed to sponsoring this bill, but I think we will try this process again this year. And it was really a team effort that we pulled together. And I know all of you have your teams that you work with in your various constituencies. But one of the things we did a little different last year was we actually did what I'd characterize as a dress rehearsal. We made an agenda similar to what Karen has for today's meeting, any meeting that you would go to, but we actually divided up who was going to say what, and we practiced it ahead of time on a Zoom meeting so that everyone was comfortable, because the mix of people that we had a few, 2 or 3 people who had done the live Day on the Hill visits in Washington. And the rest of the people were very dedicated members of AACVPR and our tri-state affiliate, but had not ever participated in Day on the Hill before. And I would really say that one advantage of doing the Zoom approach of Day on the Hill was that we were able to recruit a lot of new interest, people who were never able to go to Washington, but really were interested in the whole process. So what we did was we developed an agenda or a script of who was going to cover what topic. And I just will share with you the main bullet points that we covered, because maybe it will give you some ideas. So we are opening, and by the way, the senators, of course, were not among the people who attended this meeting. It was their health staffers, and we were grateful for that. They were, one of them was familiar to us. One was new to our group. And so again, we had a little bit of catch up to do with the newer person. But we started with our opening comments. Again, I would say, similar to what Karen just did with all of us, was for someone who was experienced to give the message of why are we here? Why are we started right out of the gate of why are we here? We are here to talk to the senator about HR 3348, or the Senate version, getting a Senate version of that particular bill. So we opened with that approach very, directly, and tried to clarify that was our purpose of being here. And then we did, for one of the senators, we did a couple of minutes of, we had some history. Senator Casey here in Pennsylvania, we have been going to see for 15 years already. And he's been very supportive of other efforts. So we reminded the staff of that history, that we, the tri-state group, were not new to the senator. He knew us. He had supported our efforts before. We were asking again for his support. So I thought that was an interesting piece to pull in. On the other senator, he was new to us. And again, we use that time to give him more background. And by the way, when I'm talking about time, just like this meeting, you want to get 15 to 20 minutes usually with these staffers. So our outline was, we had about 6 people who were going to talk, and we really made a point of saying everybody gets 3 to 4 minutes. That's it. So you really have to think very concisely about what are you going to say? What's your message for your piece of this agenda? So one of the next pieces that we did in 3 to 4 minutes, which was really a challenge, was to explain to the staffers what is cardiac rehab, what is pulmonary rehab. So, after you say, why are we here? We're here to try to generate support from the senator. But what's this about, cardiac rehab, pulmonary rehab? We started with the question of, do you know about cardiac rehab? Do you know about pulmonary rehab, what it is? And the person who was assigned that practiced a lot to try to condense those thoughts into a couple of minutes, because you know how difficult that is. But it was an important piece of the message, so we surely wanted to get that in there. And then our next people were folks from hospitals that were impacted by 603, literally. And we had searched them out ahead of time to gather their stories. So one of the stories was a very veteran cardiac rehab program, as in 35 plus years, one of the original cardiac rehabs in the center of Pennsylvania, that had been or was about to be displaced because their hospital building was condemned and they were going to be kicked out. And so where could they go? They had a beautiful new fitness center across town. But if they moved into that fitness center, they would lose the revenue from hospital-based payments. And so they were asked to tell their story in 4 minutes about how the bill was going to impact them. And they did a great job of explaining that and saying, where are we going to go? that, we can still keep this program alive and running. Another group was a already off-site location that was going to be moved kind of across their ambulatory campus to another building. And they knew that they were going to lose dollars because they had been grandfathered in the existing site, and they were going to be moved across the campus and they would lose dollars. So again, that was a very large program in Pennsylvania. And so we thought that would get the senator's attention as well. And then the third one was one of the programs when we did the Delaware call that had been closed because of COVID and didn't know if they would ever be able to open again because the hospital took over their hospital space. And it was like, we don't know if we can open in the hospital again. And they happened to be a site that served the underrepresented population in cardiac rehab. They were actually the hospital in the center of Wilmington, Delaware. And so we tried to point out to Senator Carper's people that that population, which is underserved to start with, is going to be less served because this hospital program will go away if they can't move off campus. So those were true stories that we knew from our members, and we asked them to talk about and bring those messages to the health staffers. What was very interesting about that is while we were told at the front end, you get the usual 15 to 20 minutes with this staffer, because of these stories, the staffer hung on with us and asked questions and had a discussion to expand on that information. So I suppose my closing message of this is find those stories in your territory, because they really did get attention and they were very personal to the staffers we were talking to. And we really hoped he's in both cases would carry the messages back to their senators and say, this is true. This is really impacting our people. And so we, our constituents, and we really need to pay attention to this and see how we can help these folks. So to conclude, it was very helpful to have an outline, a plan, almost a script of what people were going to say, very concise and to the point chunks of information, and it did get the attention of the staffers. We're going to try it again this year and see if we can move it along the path even farther. So that's it.
Thank you, Pat. I was on that call and it was so compelling. I sat there with my mouth open too, because every one of them had a different story. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you, Karen.
Is Lori Lee on the phone?
I am. Hi.
All right. You want to share a few minutes?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to share a bit about kind of the logistics of making sure that you're getting your appointment set, who you're asking to get them with, and trying to make them as meaningful as possible. And so I know I'm from a large state that has 36 congressional members. And so the first thing I want to encourage you, if you're a little overwhelmed at maybe leading an effort for a state or feeling like you have to contact as many people as possible, I just really want to start off with encouraging you to find out who your key members are in your state. So those would be members of the Energy and Commerce Committee and the Ways and Means Committee, and prioritizing those appointments first to make sure that the people who potentially will be seeing this bill through committee and get it sent into a package, hopefully this spring, are very well versed in what the bills are, the importance and the impact in the districts and in the state as a whole. And so you can find those things online very easily. And I know AACVPR and Karen have provided resources for doing that as well. And so prioritizing some of those things, you can just reach out simply to their office. You can ask them who is in charge of healthcare in their office. And so what you want to try to do is get the kind of the highest ranking staffer that you can. It's always going to be pretty unrealistic to get an appointment directly with a representative. But if you can ask for the legislative director or the legislative assistant that is in charge of healthcare. That's how you're going to locate the person that you want to be in contact with. Most of the time, they like you to communicate them via email. And so just simply getting their email, reaching out to them. Again, with the DOTH page has some really great resources on legislative priorities for 2022. That's a great document that you can forward in that initial request email. I personally like to call out a specific date and time I'm requesting for an appointment instead of just a, hey, would you be interested in talking? I just say, hey, can we schedule an appointment on Wednesday the 16th at 1:30 p.m. And most of the time they're going to come back and say, no, I'm not available at that time, but what about this time? And it's a great way to open a dialogue in getting that appointment set up. So that's just an easy kind of jump in the gate. I usually do try to set an appointment out maybe at least 2 or 3 weeks so that there is a potential that their calendar has some openings. The next point, it would be who needs to join you on that call. So when I help lead efforts for districts that I'm not part of course, I'm going to reach out to members that are in that district and ask those members to reach out to physicians or patients that have powerful stories that can speak to what's happening in that district. We also, you can invite even your senior healthcare team, just people that have that convincing message like Pat was referring to. And then lastly, you want to make sure to make the ask, to make the agenda for the call succinct. Again, Pat was pointing out when you've got 6 people and a 15 to 20 minute call, the flow needs to be fairly well organized so that you're laying out the matter, you're laying out the background, you're laying out the importance. We've mentioned on other calls before, I like to share a map of where the deserts are in healthcare, specifically for cardiac and pulmonary rehab for my state. I'll show the congressional member or the staffer their map overlapped with the map of their programs. And that is a real attention getter when I can say, in your district of 750,000 people, you have 2 cardiac rehabs and 1 pulmonary rehab. That's where you're starting to get attention by making it personal to what's happening in their district and the impact. Even bringing up how many people in your district are recovering from COVID or have experienced COVID, and the fact that they have access to 1 pulmonary rehab is also a pretty good attention getter. So make sure that our message is something that they will remember, because these people take these phone calls multiple a day. They hear a lot of issues. And so we want to create some long-lasting memories of our conversations and the impact of what we're doing and how we're helping people. But again, coordinating your agenda with those on the call to make it as distinct but memorable as possible is important. And then you always want to end the call with, I call it make the ask. You need to be very clear that our goal is for that representative to co-sponsor the bill first. Next is to help promote it and get it through committee. And then finally, for it to become part of the next legislative package. So we like to end each call saying, what do you need to bring to the congressman to get him to sign on to this bill? What does he need to have? What does he like to have? What is he looking for? And how can we provide that to you? And most of the time, they're going to tell you exactly what they need. Do they need information on cost? Do they need information? They usually like me to send them a picture of the maps that I laid out on the Zoom call. So we like to follow up that call immediately with an email summarizing what we did, what we talked about, the questions that they have, and to try to get the answers that they were requesting.
So we're trying to make
And then I always ask them, what's a good time frame for follow-up, so that they know that I am going to be following up, because this is not going to be a one and done deal. Persistence is the only thing that gets their attention and what keeps these things at the forefront of their mind. And so usually I'll say, would 2 weeks be enough time for you to look into this issue and speak to the congressman to find out his thoughts and feelings, or her thoughts and feelings? And then I can get back with you about any other questions that you have. Usually they say, yeah, 2 weeks is great. And then I'll make a plan to follow up at that time. So those are just some specific details on how, who, when, and why we're setting up the meetings the way that we are. So thanks.
Thank you, Lori. I've been on some calls with Lori. They're smooth, they're efficient, they're informative, they're powerful. So thanks. I'd like to introduce and welcome and thank Steve Hilfiker for coming and wearing the patient hat for us. Steve, thank you. You're on mute, by the way.
All right, there we go. Well, thank you, and nice job, everybody. Nice job, Lori. I've been involved in legislative affairs for, well over 20 years in Florida, and so I can relate, and that's exactly the approach we take in state legislature. I'm blessed really to be able to have gone through the entire process, not only legislatively, but also as a heart transplant survivor. I had cardiac sarcoidosis, and I had that for 5 years before it was even diagnosed. So I'm kind of on a personal mission for early detection of this cardiac sarcoidosis disease. I died on July 29th of 2020, but they got me to the hospital on time and got a balloon pump installed. I had 7 heart offers in 3 days, and I'm about to share with you what cardiac rehab did for me and how important it was, for my survival and recovery and resiliency and all those messages. And so basically after the transplant in August of 2020, including pneumonia and septic shock and sepsis and 10-day medically induced coma and near-death experiences, I was in bad shape. They told my family they weren't sure what they could do and that kind of thing. But a medication change turned everything around, and I started to get better. As soon as I was off the walker after discharge, they got me involved in the cardiac rehab program. And they expected 40% exercise recovery, but I was able to achieve 209% because everybody was just, I wanted it. And they also kept pushing me. And so it's a combination of their persistence, the nurses and everybody involved with the program. I'm grateful to them. But also, the desire to recover and everything else. But the highlight of the story, what American Heart Association has, lobbyists have captured, and really what I want to be able to offer to AACVPR as well, is to be able to let everybody know that 90 days after being discharged from the hospital from a heart transplant, I climbed Sharp Top Mountain in Jasper, Georgia. So that was an 1,100-foot hike. And I didn't ask anybody permission because I knew they'd say no. But I did it anyway because I knew I could. You know why? Because of the stamina and the confidence that I got from 3 days a week in cardiac rehab. So I told that story to American Heart Association. All of a sudden, I'm getting phone calls from their federal lobbyists. And so I hope to be talking. I don't believe it'll actually be Senator Scott and Senator Rubio of Florida. I'm in Fort Myers, Florida. Not actually sitting in the Everglades at the moment, but sitting right on top. I know I'll be speaking with their aides, but I've done this. I'm familiar with the process. I've gotten bills passed. I've drafted myself on environmental issues. I'm an environmental consultant, 31-year CEO in Florida of Environmental Risk Management is the name of the company. But I intend to advocate on behalf of Myocarditis Foundation, your group, American Heart Association. I know the process. I'm on boards and chaired committees for environmental groups since I was 25 years old. So anyway, the power of the testimony is that basically, in my opinion, it extends your life to the extent that the patient has access to cardiac rehab and then follows through on their own with the encouragement of the program. It's do you return to your old habits and have another cardiac incident, or do you overcome and achieve and receive total revitalization and a complete extension on life? I mean, I'm fired up. This is a new lease on life. The donor was 32 years old. God bless his family. But it's with 32-year-old energy that I'm approaching this, and I'm excited. So I guess that's the extent. Do you want anything more, Karen?
That's great. And I feel fortunate that I live in Florida and you will be joining our calls on with the Florida team. So look forward to that. Thanks.
Well, to the extent that I can, I'm happy to provide the patient voice and that testimony
Yeah,
to anyone who will listen.
it's valuable. And that's why I wanted everyone to kind of hear your story, your enthusiasm, because it adds, that's what the health staffer really identifies with so much. Thank you, Steve.
My pleasure.
I'd like to let Wayne take about 3 or 4 minutes, Wayne, if you could, to give us a little bit of longer vision before we have a inside view coming from Mr. McGovern's office staffer. So Wayne. And you can unmute.
Thanks, good idea.
We all do that.
I can talk loud, but not that loud. Lori Lee actually hit it on the head in her section is before you finish up, set a day and time to follow up. Usually with an email is what they like. And even just a day. When can I be in touch with you? What do you need from me in order to get this done? But also set a time frame and stick with it. If you don't hear from that legislative assistant in that time, feel free to email them again. They have 20 to 30 of our type of meetings a day, so it's easy for them to kind of get things lost in the shuffle and to stay on them. To quote one of our famous AACVPR members, Murray Lowe, persistence, persistence, persistence is what gets it done. Once you've heard back from them and they either say, geez, I got my member to sign on, or I need some other information in order for the person to consider signing on, get that to them and then follow up again. That makes the biggest difference. That's how we in Massachusetts have gotten the results we've gotten so far also. And the follow-up, it's just as important as the original meeting, if not more important, actually, to keep the staffer on track, actually, with what they need. They get distracted easily too. They've got so much going on. So once they get a couple of emails from you, it's going to make it easier for them to be thinking of you as well. I'm a pretty familiar name in several congressional offices because of that.
Wayne, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
We've been in some of those offices together. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Luce, who is the Health Legislative Assistant in Mr. McGovern's office, our Democratic lead introducer. And I will say, Shelby, thank you very much for your superb assistance on this. And she's had multiple calls with Kate Trainer and I, and she's been very responsive. And we really appreciate that, Shelby. And you can see the passion with which we want to go with this bill. So this is your opportunity to tell us how to do it better, what not to do, whatever you want to share. So your perspective. Thank you for joining us.
Of course. And of course, right as you said, I've been responsive. I realized I didn't send my bio and headshot. So I will give just a very brief introduction of who I am.
Thank you.
Yes, my apologies. It's been a crazy day if you've been following the news. So my name is Shelby Luce, as Karen mentioned. I have been with Congressman McGovern now since August, but have worked in many other Hill offices. I was with a representative from California. I was on the Senate side. I've worked for a committee. So I'm, first and foremost, just want to say thank you all for your advocacy and willingness to take a day and take some time to meet with members about this bill. It is way more powerful for offices to hear from you than it is from me bugging them in their inbox saying, hey, I think you should get on this bill. And when I got on, I was just hearing some of the tips of what's helpful. And I decided to kind of break up my remarks into 2 sections. One, just what I think is helpful from a health staffer perspective. And then 2, to talk a little bit about just the bill process and some of that. But a lot of the tips on there were super helpful. Before I joined the Hill, I worked at a nonprofit, and I wish I had a briefing like this before some of my legislative meetings. So kudos to the organizers for preparing you all. So I think a couple things, just, I know it sounds like a lot of folks have gone over tips for meeting with meetings. I think the thing that's most helpful when I'm having a meeting with someone is to understand why it's affecting our state or our district, if you can get that specific. And, because if we're here, as I think some folks have mentioned, we're presented also hundreds of issues a week that we need to focus on. But if we don't understand why it's important for our district, the data is always really helpful if you have access to that. But even if you have one example of a clinic within the state, that's often enough to make me go from kind of hoping this meeting will get over soon to feeling like I need to take interest in what we're talking about, to be very blunt. I think that can, the patient stories are always extremely helpful, but I think if we know that there's a place that's employing people in our district, or there's a place that is serving people in our district that's negatively impacted by this regulation, that for me is what I need to go back to my boss with, so that when I tell my boss, hey, this is why you should get on this bill, XYZ clinic is being negatively affected by this, and I can do kind of some quick data there, that is going to quickly move your bill to the top of the pile of things that my boss is going to approve that day. So that's just takeaway one, really making sure you emphasize throughout the meeting how important this is for your state or district. I think along those lines, I'm like looking at some of my notes here. It's also helpful to know just if my boss has done anything on this before. And that's a nice to have, not a need to have. But if you can point to, hey, your boss was actually a co-sponsor of this last year, or, I can see in the past they've done work in the cardiac space. That is really helpful. That shows that you've done your homework, and it's going to make me feel respected as a staffer, and also makes my job a lot easier. I might have forgotten that we did something in this space, and that my boss actually has shown that he's really interested in the cardiac world, the cardiology world in general. So again, I know you all are full-time working elsewhere, and this is something you're doing on the side, but even if you want to do a quick congress.gov search to see what that member has maybe gotten on, if there are any other healthcare bills that seem similar, that's always a really nice touch that I recommend. I would also say, just sort of getting back to the district, if there are any places that can't be represented within the meeting that you can reference as having been affected by this, or some of the larger groups, I know there are quite a few organizations that endorse the bill. I think those are good for members and staffers to hear too, just so they understand that, again, I think you want to show both the breadth and depth of the issue. So it's here's everyone that supports this, everyone that understands this is a big issue. That's your breadth piece. And the depth is, look how many people, this is why they're so dramatically impacted in our district. And I think being able to show both just makes a staffer better understand that this is something that they need to be taking seriously. I know that the other piece is just the why now, which I imagine was talked about maybe earlier on, but there's so many reasons in this case of why now. We have COVID, how things are more urgent, eligibility for pulmonary work. So I think if you can tie in something even related, I think COVID, a lot of groups are using COVID right now. Obviously that's the big thing that we're all experiencing together. So if there are any other things that make sense for your state of why this is important, I think that's always a good thing to show as well. But again, this has obviously been impacting a lot of places for a long time. So that's not quite as necessary here, but if there's any newsworthy tie within the last 6 months, that's always something I encourage too. So I can pause there for a second, Karen. I don't know if we're doing questions or if you want me to kind of keep going, but those were some of my big takeaway tips of what's helpful.
Those are helpful. Anyone have any burning questions? Otherwise, I could listen to Shelby talk for another hour.
Hey, Shelby, it's Kate. I just wanted to thank you. Obviously, you and I and Karen have had a lot of chance to connect together, but I want everybody to know just how very responsive Shelby's been, how much we've appreciated that in her continuing efforts, really on behalf of organization in this legislation. One of the things, Shelby, that I think we had touched on in one of our calls, it's a little different this time around in terms of our advocacy, is we don't have that companion Senate bill.
Yep.
And so, but we will intend, you know, to reach out to our state senators. So if you could shed a little light on what you think might be the way to approach that, in view of the fact that we don't have a specific ask of a Senate bill support, but how we could use their support as potentially this House bill moves forward.
Yes. So I think there are two parts there that I can highlight. First, I think that there's it's a very, very nice to have if you have a Senate companion. It's not a need to have, which I think is a common misconception. So I just would hate for this group to go through the whole great advocacy day and you don't get a Senate bill and feel very disheartened. Having that knowledge and understanding is just being familiar with it as a staffer is just as important as getting the co-sponsorship. So just wanted to put that out there first and foremost. I think as the Senate, you know, as you start to approach the Senate, I think a lot of the principles that I mentioned are the same, really emphasizing why this is so important for someone's state. If you can have any, you know, I would even suggest for state, if there are any really large clinics that you have contact information for that can say, hey, these folks will be following up with you. I think that follow-up piece with the Senate offices is really critical. And I think, but, you know, a lot of the strategies that you'll be using for the House co-sponsorship, if I were in your shoes, looking at the senators that I'll be meeting or that you'll all be meeting with, just think about both committee position, of course. I mean, that's, again, a nice to have, but also just if they, again, I'm kind of rambling a little bit here, but reminding them that they've done things on this before, I think is a great piece for senators. Because oftentimes in the Senate, there's, you know, a little bit of people kind of will take over an issue area and say that's their issue area. And so if you can show that work that they've done connects to this, and this is why this is really an opportunity for them to expand or to keep doing what they're already doing, I think being able to just show to them that this is a space that a bill that makes sense for them to introduce. And that's both from a state data perspective and a previous legislation perspective. And I see someone asked where you can find the history of a congressman's support. Honestly, just congress.gov. If you go on there, if you haven't played around, it's a pretty easy to use tool, and you can search by keywords. You can even just look up what the member has co-sponsor. There's a little button, and you can go on the 117th Congress or 116th and just click on the health subcategory, and that will give you all the bills that they've sponsored or co-sponsored. That would be a great place to start. Because otherwise, if you start Google searching, it becomes a mess. So I think that's the cleanest way to see even just titles of what they've done. But, you know, I think that for the other piece I would say is of just how to really talk with offices, knowing there isn't a Senate bill yet. I think just it's still worth having the conversation and say, we are looking, you know, we have a lot of, or how would I phrase this? We do have a bill on the House side. I think I would also emphasize that there has been a bill on the Senate side before, and feel free to list off who was a co-sponsor before, because that will help a Senate staffer get an understanding of like, okay, is this a really extreme left issue or something that's more on the, and I think that helps them just ideologically understand if it's something their boss would support. So I would make sure you have those names handy, because I think that can help folks see like, where does, again, everyone's just trying to contextualize, where does my boss fit in and where does this bill fit into what my boss tends to do? And so speaking to the fact that there was a Senate bill, obviously, you know, we lost the senator, how we're looking for someone that can champion it in that same way, I think is a very compelling speech. And then if they seem uninterested, then trying to get that yes of, do you think your boss could be supportive of this if it came to the floor? I wouldn't use that until you can kind of tell the person's not interested, but that's still giving you a commitment. That would sort of be my recommendation there. Yeah, I can pause again.
That great stuff that I hadn't thought of. So I think that's very valuable, Shelby, really. Man, so much to learn.
It's a lot of politics behind the politics. So even if you just remember one point of all of this, and you will be way better off than the most people we meet with, unfortunately. But I think, the other piece is I just realized there are a couple more notes I had on meetings. One other tip, I'm jumping around a little bit and then I'll get back to just any bill related questions. I would make sure you ask the staffer for their email if you are a constituent of that office, because I think what often happens is they'll say, yeah, follow up with us. It ends up being the group that follows up. And I'm not sure exactly how you all are planning to do that, but having the constituent reach out to me again versus the group reach out to me again, I'm much more likely to respond to the constituent if they've followed up, because that's showing, a voter in our district is following up versus a group that could be based in like Iowa, and I don't feel as inclined to respond if I have a bunch of emails to respond to. So just be another tip that I have. Just let me see here. Karen, were you gonna say something?
No, I was just gonna, the whole group to know that you've moved the Dear Colleague letter from
Yes.
Bill, and if you want to.
Yeah, I can definitely speak to that. So I sent Karen and Kate the Dear Colleague, which is basically just going to have everything that you all will be saying in your meeting, but in a clean email format. So if I were you, I would recommend just as a you could using that as a follow-up, because that has all the information. It has myself, it has Adrian Smith's staffer to reach out to. It just makes it really clean, and they can keep that in their inbox a lot easier. But add your own personal message and forward that along would sort of be my suggestion there with the Dear Colleague. And I see there are a couple questions in the chat that I can answer quickly too. So one is, do you think a constituent story on cardiac or pulmonary event would give would help with the ask or make a more impactful ask? Yes, those are always super helpful. I think if you can do the combination of the reality of data that you're seeing in the state, and then also that one really powerful story, because I think that the hard part of this bill is it's a very technical bill, but it has a lot of very personal stories. And so I think being able to tie that together of, hey, we have this kind of technical fix here that's not super sexy in terms of bill wise, but the really important parts are what it's done for people's lives. I think that's how you can tie in a story or two. But I think depending on who you have in your meeting, I would maybe pick just one or two stories max. I think it can be a lot if you have everyone go around. So if you can have one or two stories, so another person that can talk about the data and what this means, another person that can speak to the real substance of the bill, that's a well-rounded meeting. Because I know that oftentimes meetings, half your meeting will be taken up by the stories, and really people only need one or two to feel the impact. Via email, how will you know it's a constituent following up versus someone else? We just put that in your email. Like, again, so nice to meet you. As a reminder, I'm a resident from XYZ, or even just say like, I'm a resident from the state. Really appreciate you meeting. Would love to hear, if your boss is able to join. And also oftentimes too, if you use your personal email versus like the, whatever advocacy.org, you can pretty quickly tell that it's a constituent reaching out if it's a personal email. Karen and Kate, I don't know if it's helpful to go just a little bit through the bill. I mean, I know you all are very familiar with the bill, but I can just speak a little bit to the process in the committee, but or if there's anywhere else that'd be helpful for me to touch on.
I saw a couple heads nod yes.
Yeah, okay. So on the House side, you might have seen it, the bill is referred to two committees, and that is Energy and Commerce and Ways and Means. Our next step here is going to be to work again with the committees to see how we can get this bill hopefully incorporated into a larger package. I think these are things that you don't necessarily need to tell the staffer because they're going to know all this, but mostly just helpful for your knowledge. So we would need the bill to pass both committees. Full transparency, Ways and Means is a lot friendlier to these issues than Energy and Commerce. So our big hurdle here is going to be Energy and Commerce. Also with Ways and Means, I know not everybody's from Massachusetts, but it also helps that my boss has introduced her. We have a fellow Massachusetts person as the chairman of Ways and Means. What that process really looks like is it starts off with trying to first find the appropriate vessel for this bill to go into. So that might be a larger package. This bill would be a little bit of a stretch, but it could go by itself, and it will go into a committee markup that can look different. I'm, kind of trying to keep it broad because I don't know exactly what our situation is going to be like, but hypothetically, if it were to go into a larger bill, bill would go into front of the committee markup. The committee members would debate it, talk about any changes, whatnot. Sometimes they would bring panelists on to talk about the importance of the different pieces of the bill. And then from there, it would most likely go to the House Rules Committee, which fortunately my boss is the chair of. That is the point. And again, there are a lot of different technical pieces here. We could have things with amendments, we could have things that don't, but it most likely would then go to the Rules Committee for another series of marking up, looking through the bill text, and then it would go to the House floor for a vote. If it passes, it would then go over to the Senate, go through a committee markup period over there, be voted on. If there were no changes different than the House, then it would go to the president. And again, this is like, I would be happy if we get this thing moving to jump back on and talk to you all about the process again. But there are quite a few steps, but I think the real amazing part of getting all these co-sponsors is that we can show to the committee there are a lot of people that care about this. This is timely. This is something they should be focusing their time and attention on. And really, if you are in a meeting with anyone from Energy and Commerce or Ways and Means, those are the meetings you really want to shine in, because getting those members can really help move this process along.
That sounds like a 5-year process, but
it can be a week process if
okay,
it's the right
that's
timing,
all I
but-
needed to hear. I needed some encouragement on that.
Exactly. I mean, look at
Thank you.
these larger COVID bills we've passed. It's definitely possible.
True,
But
true.
I think it's important to keep in mind, if it doesn't get done this year, that doesn't mean that the work that we've all done here is not super important. We're waiting for the right moment, and that could be next month. It could be next year, but the real key is making sure that members are familiar with this issue and why it's so important, because the last thing you'd want is for people to be, you finally get to that place and they're like, wait, what does this do? They don't fully understand. And that's a situation we want to avoid. So this is the prep work to get us to a place where when we're voting, when it's in front of committee, it becomes a very quick and easy yes.
All right, we're going to try and go for that quick and easy yes for you. And thank you so much for the.
Of course.
That's.
And I, you know what, I'll put my email in the chat too, just if anyone has any questions, or if you are in the middle of your meeting and you need to direct someone to me, feel free to use that email.
Thank you, Shelby.
Of course.
As Kate said, you've been just the consummate.
Well, it helps when you say I have a group of, 50 plus people that are going to come support the bill. Thank you all. I mean, I know advocacy is a lot, so I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedules to help.
Thanks, Shelby.
Quick question. I'm Amy Knight, and I am in a representative district, but I'm also employed by a hospital within the district, as we all mostly are. Is it more powerful to say I'm from this hospital as an employer, or really, like you said, a personal email? Because we all,
In the follow-up,
or in the initial meeting, just in the communications. Because
I think both is great. I think both shows you are someone. I think more reasons to show why your voice matters is better. And that's, a double whammy, is that you're someone that is seeing this day in and day out with patients, but also, as a constituent, as someone with family members that could be affected by this, you care about it too.
Amy, you bring up a really good question. And I talked with Shelby and Karen about this a little bit. So, a lot of large health systems have internal government affairs offices or advocacy groups. And so I went to our corporate MGB group with this to talk to them about it, and whether or not, I could say I was not only representing my viewpoint, but if the hospital at large would be able to get behind it, and I'd be able to say that in fact that exists. And they, spent a lot of time talking with me, researching this, and came back and said, absolutely, make sure they know that we support this, and and let us know how we can help you. So, I mean, you can always, not only individually, but, sort of collectively with the power of that institution, put that muscle behind this as well.
Yeah, if you have the backing of your that is like the greatest thing as a staffer we could ask for, is that we have we know a group that we can reach out to beyond the constituent that speaks highly of the bill. So Amy, you are going to do very well in this meeting. You have all the different points that we would need for a staffer.
Shelby, I have a question as well. Jenny
Great,
Dow,
yeah.
Massachusetts. And my question is, if you are also not only a constituent, but also a delegate and have worked on the representatives campaign, do they care about that?
I mean, I think it's a nice thing to throw in. If you were for some reason tied and weren't able to say that for whatever reason. I mean, I think that's any way that you can show that you are a voice that matters to this member. I mean, we're supposed to think all the voices matter, but if you have 3 reasons why, that's even better. So I think go ahead.
Okay.
Great. Shelby, thank you. I want to be respectful of your time. And
No problem. Yeah.
so-
And
so
if there are any
gracious.
if there are any other questions, please don't hesitate to use my email. But thank you again all for taking time to do this.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you. We'll bring it to you. We will.
Great. Take care, everybody.
In the last couple minutes we have, Molly and Kathy, are there any instructions for us regarding process or anything? The debrief call is sometime in
Yes.
March.
In March, you're correct, yes.
I have another call.
I've started to add a few links into the chat here because I want to be mindful of everyone's time. Everyone who participates in DOTH must register. That's how you're going to receive all of our communication so you don't miss anything. It's a very short registration process. So I've added the link in the chat here. It's basically just AACVPR, Day on the Hill. So please make sure that you're registering. Anyone you know who's participating, make sure they're registering. As you're making your appointments with the staffers, please add them to the virtual master appointment grid so we can kind of keep track of what appointments are being made, who you're talking to. I put that link in there as well. And then in my own personal plug here, we have created a community for all of you to have the opportunity to chat with each other. If you have some of these great ideas that you want to share, register for DOTH. You're immediately added. This is an AACVPR Central. You're immediately added to the DOTH community. So it'll be under discussions and then my community. And then you will see Day on the Hill DOTH 2022. And I've already added Lori's great PowerPoint presentation about how to get an appointment. So you can access that right there. If you have any ideas, things that are coming up as you're having these calls that you want to remind everyone else about, please go in here, add a post, upload any files that you want. It's just a great opportunity for you guys all to connect with each other.
Kathy, thank you so much, and Karen Louie as well. I wanted to just offer my final thoughts. As a psychologist, I understand the anxiety. And like anybody who might be a little nervous, and I've been through this before, and it's a lot of information. It's a lot of working, moving parts, and it's a lot of information that is a depth that we don't have. And I think a lot of us are maybe perfectionists and want to understand every little bit of this to feel comfortable. Let me just let you know, you're not going to be super comfortable, but that's okay. The main thing you do is you lean into this a little bit, learn what you need to get your talking points down, and then just jump in. Just go ahead and do it. These are 20-minute calls, tops. You will be fine. You just do your best. You will have your friends there with you. Somebody's got your back. Other people will jump in, and you will feel great having done it, serving the cause, serving our patients, serving our facilities. Just go ahead and do it. Let us know. Keep us talking. Karen or Kathy, were there any other follow-up points that we need to make?
No, I just want to greatly thank Kathy and Molly. I lean on them heavily every day, and they're doing so much work. I feel badly, but they somehow continue to do it. And I wanted to also just shout out to, I've already been on like 20 calls because Julie Rounds in California started, and she never stopped. And she's just done an impressive job getting. So if we can all follow Julie's doggedness and persistence, we will do just fine. And Lori Lee too, I've been on a number of calls with her. So the time is now for the rest of us to join in and make our voices heard. We've got the passion, the patience, and now we know what to say. So I thank you all so much for taking the time and being part of this.
Kate, really quickly, I saw you put a question in the chat. We did reach out to affiliate presidents to help us track that information, so we can check into that survey that we opened and
Okay.
see where that stands.
Great. I mean, I think listening to Shelby today, the more personal you can make it to your state and then kind of put that in perspective nationally, I think that, you know, the data is really going to help us. It's all about data.
Yep.
Yeah,
Thank you, Molly.
yeah, excellent. Thank you, Kate.
And this is
Everyone.
Debbie. In our state, we went ahead and actually Hillary that's sitting next to me, her husband actually did, and I don't know if I can share this with you or not. We went ahead and located all of our facilities that were in our state. Can you see that map or not?
No, I can't see
Here we
it.
go. Right here. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's not very big, but we went ahead and
Wow.
located the facilities in our state so that we could actually show in our own state the actual counties that were missing out on being able to have any services offered and the distance of time from their county
Wow.
to go in.
Sad. Wow.
Instead of just doing the other map from the MapQuest.
Yep.
We like that. And then we have one also that has it with our images of each of the facilities and the MapQuest where they can click on and see the name of the facility and the contact people and where they're located as well. And we've already sent that out with all of our meeting requests.
Wow. And you also, Deb, you came on earlier than others, but you have invited and your representative is going to come and tour your facility. So
Yes, he is. And meet with our physicians and our administrative staff. And yes, we're going to tour him right from the start, he's already been in the emergency room before. We're taking him from the cath lab all the way through and ending up in cardiac rehab so he can get the full picture of why it's so important for this whole process and why it's important for us to be able to reach these people. So yeah, we're excited.
Yeah. Well, I've kept you all 5 minutes over. We'll go ahead and thank you all so much for joining and for sharing all the smart things you've done and been doing and will keep doing for this advocacy effort. Thank you. Have a good evening.